All right, let's get talking now about your upcoming Cubist assignment. So what we're going to do is first point out one thing here looking at our watercolor board. I have added a little bit of painter's tape to the edge of our watercolor paper, and that can be a huge advantage. So when you're done, you can rip this off and it will make it so we can add a frame to it or mat it a lot easier. You're not painting right up to the edge. So it's not a requirement, but it's a suggestion. I would highly encourage you to consider doing that. Okay, I would also encourage you to do some thumbnails. I'm going to skip directly into the painting process on this, but again, it's part of your grade, and I'm looking for those thumbnails to be submitted as well. Okay, so I again recommended just choosing one or two objects, perhaps three if you feel so inclined. I'll go ahead and show you my objects I've selected. They're just simple things I found here in my house. I have a little tape measure, Stanley 16-inch, or 16-foot rather, tape measure, 16-inch tape measure. That wouldn't do us a whole lot of good, would it? Anyway, and then I also have a trusty little old-timer pocket knife right here. So what can you can't go too far without a pocket knife. So these are just two things that I had real handy, and I'm not super concerned about necessarily what it is, though there are things I both like. So if you want to choose a subject matter that means something to you, that's great, and that's what I'm encouraging you to do here. Or it can just be something very simple that maybe you don't have an attachment to necessarily. I've selected my subject material. Now let's talk about how I can proceed in the drawing. Now there's more than one way to do this. I'm just going to show you one technique using these two objects as my catalyst. I'll start with the pocket knife, and this is where doing some preliminary thumbnails can really come in handy, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and sketch out the basic shape of the pocket knife right here, okay, and put it in the center. I might even take the blade up to the top coming off here. Might be just a little bit longer body than that. Okay, I'm going to sketch this out. I'm just using graphite right now. This is a 2mm wide pencil that I like quite a bit. Picked it up at the dollar store in Korea, and I love this thing. Use it for all sorts of sketching. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here. I can choose to, include a couple of the details. Here's the old timer little label, a couple of the brads that are holding that knife together, right? Okay, so here we go. We've got a basic shape. Now, being Cubism, I need to make sure I'm showing this from multiple perspectives. So now I'm going to go ahead and do one maybe where I collapse the blade, and I'm going to go ahead and zero in on the top here and draw this object like so. And I'm going to overlap it. Don't be afraid to overlap it. Okay, so I have the object like this, the blades coming up. Okay, something kind of in this neighborhood. Now I'm going to look really close, and it says old timer here, so I'm just going to take that T. I'm going to make that T really big. So you can see you'll probably want to do some thumbnails to come up with a composition that you might be happy with. All right, so I'm just taking little different sections. I'm going for large, big, and small. So now I might take this pocket knife and draw it really, really small. Maybe this time, to reinforce to the viewer that we're looking at multiple perspectives, I'll change it up, and I'll put both of these blades out, and I'm going to draw it really small. So I might just place that right down here. Okay, this blade's coming out all the way, the smaller whittling blade. And then this blade here is over in this manner. Okay, super quick. All right, I'm not worried about making it perfect in this stage. I'm just kind of roughing in my drawing here. Let's go ahead and move on to the tape measure. Same sort of thing. And go ahead and draw the tape measure like this. Okay, so we can see that it's in its usable state with the tape measure coming out. So now I'm going to go ahead and just sketch in that basic design as well. I can choose what I want to leave on here. Maybe I'm just going to keep it a little more simplified, put in a couple of those elements here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, again, choose a different vantage point. I'm going to get really close. There's an interesting screw here on the back belt buckle loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw that quite large. Again, I'm really forcing this overlapping idea, right? Here's the screw for that. Okay. And then it kind of has this ring that goes around. I kind of like that shape. All right, and the tape measure, you know what? I'm kind of liking where this is going, so I'm just going to draw the tape measure quite large right here. And if you want to remember any kind of recipe, it's to have large, medium, and small. You know, here it says 1/2 inch, so I'm just going to go ahead and over here include that in my drawing. A little 1/2 inch sign. I'm going to take the S from the Stanley and go ahead and put it right back here. So you can see how it can be really fun just to take these objects and start to create all sorts of different things. I'm going to take the handle and just do the little handle knob right here in a drawing. Okay, it has that texture that's coming across. A little knob that comes down. All right, so the thing I want to do is convince the viewer, and most importantly for your grade, convince me that you're looking at an object from various perspectives. So refer to that lecture on cubism that I shared with you earlier. Okay, now I can keep going, but I don't want to necessarily take up too much time. This is where I'll stop for the sake of the demo and show you how you might tie some of these elements together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a couple of lines that I really like. I'm going to take this line and I'm going to continue it all the way through my form. Now, if you study something like analytical cubism in greater detail, some of those works that were created by Braque and Picasso, you'll see that this is something that they would often do. They would find an element that they really liked and they would kind of incorporate it. So I'm going to take a line straight off the edge of this handle here. This is just an option if you want to kind of play the same game that they did. You don't have to. Again, when I go to grade this, the only thing I'm really looking for is the fact that you've used a couple of objects and you're viewing them from different vantage points, excuse me. So the thing that you should realize too is if, like, let's say I'm a huge pianist, I want to, do a baby grand or something like that as my subject matter. You can do that. The requirement is you get online or you research multiple perspectives of that piano. Maybe you're drawing the inside of it, the outside of it, etc. And this is why you're going to want to do a couple thumbnails. You might find your first couple completely disastrous, or you might like a pocket here and you don't like some of these other elements. Okay, so this is certainly kind of roughed in, but you get the idea of where to start, okay? Once you've come up with a composition that you're happy with, I'm going to say I'm relatively happy with this composition. I'm going to go ahead and run with it. The next step is we're going to come back to our watercolors. Once you have your drawing plugged in the way you like it, in my case I just need to add a little spritz of water here, rehydrate my watercolors. Okay. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to utilize those techniques that you learned when you were doing your watercolor wash sheet. Okay, those 5 techniques. So for example, right here I might select to do a flat wash. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to lay down my brush without lifting it up, right? Assign that color. And here's the other thing, you can get real creative on your color. So even though my measuring tape was silver and yellow, I could come in and use violet or green or whatever color you want, right? So here I have a flat wash. Maybe in this section I'm going to choose to do a little bit of wet to wet. So I'm going to choose this the blade of the knife right here, why not? So I'm going to come in, add a little bit of tone there, and I'm going to come in and paint that wet into wet. Ooh, that's a cool effect, isn't it? Let's do a little more wet into wet. How about, again, I just want to show you don't have to use the actual color. In fact, it might be more interesting if you aren't, but it's up to you. I mean, if you want to make it more realistic, you can. So I'm going to come over here and maybe just do a little bit of wet into wet into this pocket right here. One thing I should mention, you probably started figuring this out already, but as you change colors, you need to wipe your brush and clean it out. So you're not seeing that on the camera. I haven't figured out a way to mount water to this. Okay, but the thing that you want to do is make sure your brush is clean each time you change color here. So what I'm progressing on my painting on as I continue is being very mindful of those 5 different techniques that I need to utilize. Okay, so far I have some flat washes. I have some wet into wet. Don't forget, as a review, I'll share the chart with you right here that you need to implement into this painting. You need to have flat wash, a convincing use of wet into wet. I'm also looking for the fade wash where you go dark to light, and that's a hard one. Sometimes students forget that, so make sure I have that bleed wash or that fade wash present. And then the real tricky one, that dry brush. Okay, I have a bigger brush on me right now, and I'm going to show you how that dry brush works a little bit better, because in the last video it was a little rough at the end there. So I'm going to demonstrate how that dry brush works. Okay, it's an effect that a lot of people like to use over the top of an area that's already painted. But again, I'm just going to take a little bit of paint. I have a bigger brush. A flat brush tends to work better than a round brush, in my opinion, okay, for this technique. Now I'm going to take a lot of the moisture and paint out, and then the way you get that effect is you're just going to drag it. Okay, it's a pinch wet, but not bad. Okay, you're going to drag it and you get this nice broken effect. And it's also not using a lot of pressure as you lay it down. So you can see that nice broken mark, and that adds a textural effect. So this is an early stage of my Cubist piece, but knowing this, it might help you figure out what was going on some of those other student examples, okay? Now, it's ultimately up to you if you want to emphasize these lines. One thing you can't do is you cannot erase any of these lines after you've watercolored over the top, right? So if you don't want your lines to show, that's where your kneaded eraser comes in. And what you're going to want to do is turn it into a Tootsie Roll shape like this, and turn it into a cylinder. And before you put watercolor across the top, you can go like this, and you can kind of lift it up, or you can blot it, or you can just flat out erase it like this if you don't want those lines to show. So keep in mind, it's all personal preference. Some artists really like those lines, other artists not so much. So it's up to you on what you decide to do. You could also take a Sharpie when you're done. If you want to do some line work when this is all completely dry, you could take that Sharpie, or even maybe better yet, that Micron pen that comes in your kit, and you could choose to come in and emphasize some of these lines. It often isn't necessary, and I do see students ruin nice paintings by doing that, but it can enhance the work too, and that's where you have to have a personal judgment call to ask yourself, do the lines work, or do the lines not necessarily intensify the strength of my composition? If you are going to start doing line work, you need to do one of two things. You need to either be very consistent with your lines and sort of be smart about it, or you can have line variation in there going from thin to thick to also enhance it. Okay, that's another quick little demo. Hopefully it gives everybody a great idea in terms of what you can do on your Cubist piece. Keep your objects simple, 1, 2, or 3, and knock it on out and have fun. Here we are again asking how long we might want to spend on such a painting. The expectation is that you spend between 3 to 6 hours on this particular piece in order to really meet the criteria of the expectation that's been placed in front of you. So something in the neighborhood of, again, 3 to 6 hours. Okay, I look forward to your questions on the message board and on our weekly Zoom talks. All right, take care, friends. Keep painting. All right, all my best. Bye-bye.